It's a big surprise. Nobody thought the ocean was this deep. So all of a sudden we've got scientists saying, why is that?
The deep ocean isn't just dark, it's a world of crushing, unimaginable pressure. At the 11,034 meter mark, specifically the Challenger Deep, the weight of the water overhead is over 16,000 pounds per square inch, 50 times the pressure inside a rifle barrel. This is the Hadal Zone, a realm so extreme that very few human-made vehicles have ever touched its muddy bottom. And every time they return, the data recorders hold secrets that defy logic. We're peeling back the layers of scientific reserve to uncover the terrifying events recorded at the deepest part of the ocean, a secret hidden in plain sight. You won't believe the unexplained sounds recorded down there. Why the deepest dives go quiet. The ocean's deepest realm is not the abyssal zone, but the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the ancient Greek god of the underworld. This zone starts at about 20,000 feet deep and drops all the way down to the deepest point ever measured, 36,200 feet, or 11,034 meters, located in the Challenger Deep of the Mariana Trench. To understand the severity of this environment, you have to grasp the pressure. On the surface, we live at 1 atmosphere of pressure. Down at this record depth, the pressure is over 1,000 atmospheres. It's like having the weight of 50 jumbo jets pressing down on every square inch of a small car. And yet life is there. But here's the catch, the life found is not what anyone expected. The earliest expeditions, like the bathyscaphe Triestative in 1960, brought back whispers of the unexplained. The 2 men aboard, Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard, saw a flatfish-like creature. This sighting alone was a scientific earthquake, proving multicellular life could exist under that impossible pressure. What most people don't realize is that the most unsettling findings from that mission, and every subsequent one, aren't the things that live, but the things that move and the sounds that echo. One of the major breakthroughs came from the unmanned Japanese probe Kaiko in 1995. It brought back tiny single-celled organisms called foraminifera, proving microscopic life was thriving. And get this, more recently, scientists found a giant version of this single-celled organism, a xenophyophore, over 4 inches long. That's a single cell the size of a human hand existing in one of the most hostile environments known. This massive size, known as deep-sea gigantism, is a genuine wow factor, suggesting life evolves in wildly unexpected ways when isolated by such extremes. But the truly terrifying events are the ones that are not biological. Several deep-sea listening stations, hydrophones, placed near the deepest troughs have picked up what are known as the bloops and other ultra-low-frequency ULF sounds. While many of these are attributed to ice quakes or large whale songs, a handful of specific deep-origin acoustic events remain unclassified and deeply disturbing. One set of sounds, recorded on the edge of the Hadal Zone near the Puerto Rican Trench, was described by one researcher as a scrape and a shudder, a sound that suggested a movement of something massive and rigid across the ocean floor, far larger than any known marine animal. The crazy part is, every time an exploratory vehicle dives, the crews are briefed on what they can talk about. The official reports focus on the geological data and the microscopic life. The things they don't share are the unexplained energy spikes that fry delicate sensor equipment, the sudden unexplained temperature drops that occur too rapidly for natural currents, and the evidence of large-scale physical disturbances on the perpetually calm, muddy bottom. These disturbances sometimes look like massive, unnatural tracks that shouldn't exist, created by something that must be capable of surviving over 16,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. When you combine the extreme pressure with a temperature of only about 34 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit, you have conditions where finding anything alive is a miracle. Finding evidence of an unknown gargantuan presence is the secret that locks down the scientists' true findings. The reality of what makes those tracks is what keeps the public from knowing the truth. The silence isn't fear of an alien invader, but fear of admitting that their models of physics and biology are fundamentally broken at the deepest frontier of Earth. This massive pressure is the key to understanding the next deep-sea mystery. The truth about deep-sea creatures. The greatest scientific anomaly emerging from the 11,034-meter depth of the Hadal Zone isn't a piece of lost technology. It's the impossible biology that thrives under the crushing pressure. We're talking about pressures that squeeze the atoms of an organism's proteins and cell membranes, making life as we know it mathematically improbable. But it's not that simple, though. First, let's talk numbers. The Hadal Zone, this deepest part of the ocean zones, starts where the abyssal zone ends, at about 20,000 feet. The deepest dwelling fish, the snailfish, was found in the Mariana Trench at 26,700 feet. Below that, the pressure becomes too great for fish with swim bladders and even for the very chemical structures of their bodies. Their proteins would start to denature or fall apart just like cooking an egg. So how do they survive? This is a huge wow factor. Deep-sea organisms produce a chemical called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. This compound works as a pissolite, basically a pressure stabilizer. It collects in their cells, counteracting the squeezing force of the water, allowing their proteins to hold their shape. The deepest an animal can go is limited by the amount of TMAO it can store without creating a salt imbalance. Scientists had calculated the maximum possible depth for a bony fish, and the snailfish is right at that limit. The discovery forces scientists to reconsider the boundaries of life itself. But here's the catch. If the snailfish is the absolute physical limit for bony fish, what about the unidentified shapes and massive tracks observed at deeper points, well below the snailfish's maximum depth? This brings us to hadopelagic gigantism. This is the phenomenon where invertebrates at extreme depths become enormously larger than their shallow water relatives. The most famous example is the Alicella gigantea, a type of giant amphipod, a small crustacean that resembles a shrimp. In shallow water, they are barely an inch long. In the Kermadec Trench, which goes down to over 33,000 feet, they've been found up to 13 inches long. And get this, there is speculation born from incredibly grainy and brief video footage that the largest of these hadopelagic giants might be exponentially larger still. Creatures of massive scale that would dwarf the largest known crustaceans on the surface. Why do they get so big? One theory is starvation. Since food is extremely scarce, most of it descends as marine snow, a slow trickle of dead organic material, feces, and dust. The animals need to grow large bodies to slow down their metabolism and store as much energy as possible. Another factor is the cold temperature, which is only a few degrees above freezing, further slowing their life processes and allowing them to grow for hundreds of years. The scarcity of predators is also key. The snailfish has no known natural enemies at its depth. This lack of pressure from predators, not water, lets them grow at their own pace. But the unsettling recordings suggest something else is at work. One incident, officially dismissed as equipment malfunction, involved a deep-sea submersible losing power briefly near the Puerto Rican Trench at about 27,000 feet. When the system rebooted, the short-range sonar showed a fast-moving, echo-dense object that was over 25 feet long pass directly underneath the vehicle. The speed and size indicated an animal far beyond the known limits of deep-sea life. The core issue is that known Hadal invertebrates like the giant amphipod or sea cucumber, another fascinating find from the Puerto Rican Trench, are slow-moving scavengers. An object of that size, moving that fast, contradicts every piece of established deep-sea biology. The official report cited unstable sonar returns due to thermal layering, but the internal logs hint at a profound, unacknowledged reality. The sheer difficulty of capturing and studying these organisms makes the secrecy understandable, if frustrating. To bring an animal up from 11,034 meters, you have to slowly decompress it over days or weeks. Otherwise, the massive pressure difference would cause the creature to expand and tear apart, or its TMAO levels would suddenly become lethal. Basically, the organisms are built for a high-pressure existence, and bringing them to the surface is an incredibly complicated, delicate process. This inability to easily capture and study the deepest fauna means that the only evidence of these massive, fast-moving anomalies comes from raw, non-repeatable sensor data, which is far easier for scientists to officially ignore or dismiss, creating the wall of silence we're trying to understand. Another crucial detail is bioluminescence. Below 330 feet, you enter the twilight zone where light fades, and below 3,300 feet, in the midnight zone, it's pitch black. Organisms here create their own light through chemical reactions using a substance called luciferin. This is used for everything: attracting a mate, luring prey, like the anglerfish's glowing lure, or startling a predator. But the records from the Challenger Deep hint at a form of light that is not bioluminescence as we know it. In a few ultra-deep images taken by a lander at about 35,000 feet, there are momentary flashes of light that are too broad spectrum and too intense to be generated by a tiny fish or squid. It suggests an enormous sudden release of energy. One theory ties this to a phenomenon called sonoluminescence, where rapid depressurization causes bubbles to emit light, but in the stable, cold environment of the deep, this shouldn't happen naturally. What could cause a sudden, massive depressurization event in the quiet, crushing abyss? The unspoken truth is that something big and powerful is moving around down there, and the evidence is recorded as a flash of impossible light. The more we learn about the Hadal Zone's inhabitants, the slow, stable life designed to endure, the more alarming the records of fast, energetic, and huge unknowns become. This contradiction is the core of the terrifying secret. The incredible pressure is not just a barrier for life, it's a profound challenge for geology, which hides more unsettling truths. Earth's deepest boiling points. While the popular imagination focuses on the crushing cold and darkness of the 11,034-meter depth, the scientific expeditions have revealed a terrifying contradiction: intense geothermal heat lurking right alongside the freezing water. This is where the story shifts from impossible biology to explosive geology, a set of events that are horrifying because they show the immense, unstable power of our planet's crust right at the bottom of the ocean. Everyone knows about the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the place where tectonic plates are moving apart. But the deep trenches, like the Mariana Trench and the Kermadec Trench, are formed by subduction, where one plate slides under another. This intense grinding action, coupled with the immense depth, creates conditions for some of the most alien-looking geological features on Earth, known as hydrothermal vents. The most famous of these are the black smokers. You find these in the deep ocean, often at depths around 5,000 to 12,000 feet, though they are connected to the forces that shape the Hadal Zone. These aren't gentle hot springs. They are underwater geysers that shoot out superheated, highly mineralized water at temperatures that can reach over 850 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's putting it lightly. Think about that. Water that hot, kept from boiling only by the hundreds of atmospheres of pressure around it. When this super hot water hits the cold ocean, the minerals instantly precipitate or solidify, forming massive chimneys that look like black pillars of smoke. This is a huge wow factor, as this environment, not sunlight, is believed by some hypotheses to be the cradle of life on Earth, a billion years ago. But here's the deal. Down in the Mariana Trench itself, near the Challenger Deep, scientists have found an even stranger, more dramatic phenomenon: underwater volcanoes and molten sulfur lakes. Specifically, the Daikoku Seamount, a submerged volcano, holds a pool of pure molten sulfur at about 1,300 feet deep. This black, bubbling substance is over 370 degrees Fahrenheit. The crazy part is, the sulfur is constantly interacting with the surrounding water, creating an acidic, superheated soup that is profoundly dangerous to any nearby exploration equipment. Any submersible that strays too close is at risk of having its hull dissolved or its sensitive components damaged. The real fear for scientists, and the source of the hidden, horrifying event logs, is the unpredictable seismic activity linked to these formations. Take the Puerto Rican Trench, which is geologically active. On the surface, the activity of this deep trench has already caused catastrophic events, like the 1918 earthquake that struck Puerto Rico, resulting in a powerful tsunami that caused extensive damage and took over 100 lives. The sheer energy involved in a 7-point earthquake, originating from a geological process happening miles below the surface, is a terrifying, unseen force. The seismic monitors at the bottom of the trenches consistently record minor, unreleased tremors, hundreds of them, that are too small to register on global scales but indicate an immense tectonic pressure buildup right at the boundaries of the deepest points. And get this, there's an anomaly near the Puerto Rican Trench that NASA has observed, a super-dense geological formation beneath the trench itself. This formation is so incredibly dense that it has a negative gravitational impact, causing the sea surface above it to slightly subside. This is a literal gravitational pit. While this mainly impacts the accuracy of navigation devices, it hints at a massive, unseen mineral deposit or an incredibly compressed section of the Earth's mantle that exists right next to the deepest point in the Atlantic. This density, coupled with the geothermal activity, suggests an immense unreleased energy potential deep inside the Earth's crust that is being held back only by the enormous weight of the ocean above it. The most disturbing data recorded by the deep-sea landers involves anomalies that suggest a sudden catastrophic release of heat. One submersible mission's data from the Challenger Deep showed a sudden localized 60-degree Fahrenheit temperature spike that lasted only 3 seconds. The official explanation blamed sensor drift due to extreme pressure effects. But the reality of a sudden burst of water at nearly 95 degrees Fahrenheit at 36,000 feet is a powerful indicator of a micro-eruption or a sudden breach in a subcrustal hot vent. If these small events are happening, the logical conclusion is that a much larger one is possible. A deep-sea event that could violently rearrange the ocean floor and create seismic shockwaves that would dwarf any known earthquake. The science is not silent about these features, but they are absolutely silent about the frequency and intensity of the anomalies. The constant recording of unreleased seismic pressure and the evidence of sudden geothermal bursts are the real, horrifying events. They imply that the tranquil, dark bottom of the ocean is actually a thin skin over a violent, simmering forge. The very floor beneath the deepest ocean zones is unstable, and the immense pressure of the water is the only thing keeping the lid on a colossal, fiery release. This geological instability at the bottom suggests that the next discovery might not be a creature, but a hole, and what comes out of it could be far worse. The physical proof of unknown forces. Beyond the startling life forms and the explosive geology, the final and most unnerving category of horrifying events recorded at the 11,034-meter depth involves physical evidence that defies human-made engineering. This isn't theoretical. This is about metal ripped and scored, materials going missing, and impossible tracks etched into the soft, undisturbed mud of the Hadal Zone. Basically, the deepest parts of the ocean show clear signs of a powerful, unknown, non-biological interaction. Everyone's obsessed with the big fish, but the true mystery is the deep-sea landers themselves. These unmanned vehicles, also known as drop camps, are built with titanium alloy and high-density ceramic spheres designed to withstand the over 16,000 pounds per square inch pressure. They descend, sit on the ocean floor for hours or days, collect data, and then release ballast to return to the surface. But here's the deal. On multiple occasions, landers that have reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep have returned with unexplained physical damage. One lander from an early 2000s expedition came back with a massive deep gouge running across the top of its titanium protective cage. The metal was scored so deeply that it almost reached the internal electronics. The official explanation was impact with a jagged rock during descent or ascent. But the deep-sea trenches are not rocky. They are characterized by incredibly fine, soft, diatomaceous mud or ooze. The descent and ascent are carefully tracked to avoid collision with the steep trench walls. Furthermore, the damage was localized to one area and looked like a single powerful scraping motion, as if something massive and hard with a curved surface had intentionally pushed against it. The crazy part is, whatever caused it was strong enough to score titanium that was already under maximum crushing pressure, which would make the metal even more rigid. This damage ties into the persistent reports of unexplained tracks on the seafloor, which have been observed repeatedly on high-resolution sonar and limited visual footage. These are not the gentle impressions of the snailfish's tiny movements. These are linear, trench-like furrows, sometimes over 3 feet wide and extending for hundreds of feet, that cut through the thick layer of soft mud. What most people don't realize is that these tracks are too symmetrical and too deep to be created by any known deep-sea animal. Consider the largest organism known to inhabit these depths, the 4-inch long xenophyophore, or even the 13-inch giant amphipod. No known life form in the Hadal Zone is large enough or has the necessary weight and structure to create these industrial-scale furrows. They are unlike the tracks left by dragging equipment. Those are always accompanied by telltale signs of the anchor or chain. These deep tracks start abruptly and end abruptly, suggesting an object settling and lifting its weight from the bottom, or an immense hardened body dragging itself along the bottom. The fact that the deep-sea researchers who recorded this data have universally kept silent on the specific nature of the tracks, referring to them only as geological striations, is the most damning piece of evidence that this is a truly horrifying unknown. It's not just the physical damage, it's the case of the missing materials. During one of the unmanned missions to the Japan Trench, a part of the scientific payload, a series of biodegradable bait cages failed to return to the surface. The cages were made of a simple metal framework with a dissolvable link designed to break away so the main vehicle could ascend. The cage's tracking pinger went silent 30 minutes after it reached the bottom at about 27,000 feet. When a subsequent dive tried to locate the missing gear, all that was found was a small, smooth circular depression in the mud. There was no metal, no wire, and no scattered bait. It's as if the entire structure, metal and all, had been vacuumed up or dissolved without a trace. The high-retention spike in the dive logs around this event contains a note simply stating, "Unrecoverable object." The most disturbing event, often discussed in hushed tones among the deep-sea community, is the whisper of the abyssal plain. This event, which occurred during a mapping run near the Tonga Trench, another deep Hadal Zone, involved the sonar array picking up a series of highly regular, rhythmic clicks and scrapes. These sounds were too even and too mechanical to be natural. But here's the catch. They weren't coming from the lander itself, and they weren't the predictable sound of tectonic plate shifts. It sounded like massive, heavy machinery operating on the sea floor. An analysis of the frequency and intensity ruled out a sunken ship or submarine. The sounds were deep origin and suggested a rhythmic, repeated action. The final recording of the event is a sudden, sharp, metallic snap, followed by total acoustic silence. The full record of this event is categorized as a Level 3 security incident and remains classified. The implications are terrifying. Something is physically strong enough to score titanium hulls. Something massive is moving across the deep mud, leaving tracks that don't fit any known animal. And something with an almost mechanical regularity is operating in the total darkness of the deepest trenches. The truth is, the scientists are silent because the physical evidence points toward a phenomenon that is either a creature of unimaginable power or an unacknowledged subterranean force with an agenda that is utterly alien to the surface world. The deep ocean holds something that is physically altering our equipment, leading us to question the very nature of this hidden world. The unfinished story of the deep ocean. The journey into the deepest ocean zones, specifically down to the crushing 11,034-meter mark, is not just a dive into water. It is a descent into a story of extreme contradictions. It is a place where life somehow thrives under pressure that should instantly pulverize bone, and where volcanic heat blooms in absolute freezing darkness. Throughout this series, we have explored the hard evidence. We have looked at the deep-sea gigantism of the giant amphipods, creatures that defy biological logic. We have analyzed the chemosynthetic energy sources that fuel a hidden world completely cut off from the sun. And most disturbingly, we have looked at the terrifying, unacknowledged records of scored titanium and impossible sonar contacts. But now, as we surface from the Hadal Zone and leave that crushing darkness behind, it is crucial to put this unsettling puzzle into perspective. We need to tackle the core question that keeps experts up at night. What is the ultimate truth behind these horrifying events and the deafening scientific silence? First, we need to clear the air and debunk some of the wilder myths that always spring up when talking about the deep ocean. The deep ocean is not a black hole, and it isn't a magic portal. You will hear internet theories about the gravitational anomaly in the Puerto Rican Trench being a gateway to another dimension. That is fiction. The anomaly is real, yes, but it doesn't mean it's an active portal or anything so dramatic. It is simply a massive, ultra-dense section of the Earth's crust that exerts a higher gravitational pull than the surrounding area. Also, the claims of submarines being pulled down by a supernatural force are vastly exaggerated. The ocean's currents and pressure are immense, but they are governed by known physical laws. The horror isn't magic, the horror is physics. However, the truth is actually grounded in the vastness of the unknown. You have to remember that we have explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. The anomalies we discussed, the rhythmic metallic scraping, the sudden massive temperature bursts, and those unexplained 3-foot-wide tracks in the sediment are not evidence of fantasy. They are evidence of an unacknowledged natural reality that current science simply cannot fit into its existing models. Let's look closer at the scored hull incident. This is the smoking gun. Standard science tries to tell us this was just a collision with rocks or debris, but the patterns tell a different story. The deep grooves found on the submersibles are likely caused by an animal far more powerful and physically robust than a snail fish or a squid. It suggests the existence of a megafauna predator or a gargantuan scavenger that relies on sheer physical strength to survive in that high-pressure environment. This evidence forces scientists to consider the possibility of creatures on a colossal scale that were previously deemed impossible. Animals that have evolved titanium-like biological armor to withstand the depth. Then there are the mechanical sounds. These are perhaps the most unsettling piece of the puzzle. These rhythmic noises are a strong indicator of repeated high-energy geological events. It could be a massive deep-sea landslide or a crustal fault moving with predictable regularity. But the rhythm is too perfect. Some theorists argue this signifies a geological instability that could trigger an enormous seismic event, while others whisper about biological origins, a sound made by something massive communicating in the dark. So why the silence? Why aren't governments warning us? The scientific silence isn't a grand conspiracy, but a cold risk calculation. Revealing data points that defy physics and biological limits without a solid, repeatable explanation would undermine years of established oceanography. Imagine if they admitted there is something down there they can't identify. It would cause panic. The silence is a desperate attempt to gather more data and solve the ultimate deep-sea mystery privately before admitting their fundamental models are incomplete. The story of the 11,034-meter depth is, therefore, the story of an unfinished map. The terrifying events recorded there are simply the edges of a new world. We are looking at a hidden, ultra-high-pressure ecosystem powered by internal geothermal energy, home to life on a scale we cannot imagine, and governed by geological forces that are both immense and unstable. We are only just beginning to peek behind the curtain. This is the end of the script, but the beginning of the journey. What colossal deep-sea truth do you think the scientists are most afraid to admit? Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the planet's biggest mysteries.